Have you ever found yourself completely stuck in your sermon prep? Like just staring at a single parsed Greek verb for an hour?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, trying to build an entire message around, a passive aorist, only to realize you completely missed the point of the paragraph.
It happens to the best of
You
us.
know the feeling. It's Friday afternoon, your coffee is stone cold, your Bible software is open with, way too many tabs,
Way too many.
and you've got 20 commentaries stacked on your desk. You're treating the Greek text like it's some sort of math equation. You highlight a verb, you click on it, the parsing window pops up, and you think, yes, here it is, the secret key to the passage.
It is a universally painful pastoral experience, really. You drill down so far into the inflection of one specific word, cataloging its tense, its voice, its mood, that you emerge with this brilliant, highly technical, and completely isolated theological point.
Right, a point the author never meant to make.
Exactly, a point the original author never actually intended. We treat the Greek New Testament like a dead language to be, I don't know, autopsied on a stainless steel table, rather than a living discourse.
Yeah, a discourse that was meant to do something.
Yes, to actively accomplish something in a community. We dissect the corpse, we label all the organs, and somehow we think we've understood the living person.
I've done it. I know you've done it. We sit there in the study, we isolate a sentence, we diagram it out on a whiteboard.
Oh, the whiteboard diagrams?
Right. And we think we've discovered the hidden architecture of the universe just because we found, like, a second aorist middle participle.
It feels like a massive victory in the moment.
It really does.
Hmm.
But it's the ultimate trap of traditional sentence-level exegesis.
Wow.
We get so caught up in the micromechanics of the word that we completely lose sight of the macro communication of the text.
We miss the forest for the trees.
Yeah. We end up preaching a grammar lesson instead of a sermon.
Yeah.
And the really frustrating part is the congregation can feel it.
Oh, they definitely know.
They sit there listening to us talk about the middle voice, and their eyes just, glaze over.
Well, yeah, because you aren't actually telling them what the text means. You're just listing the ingredients the author used to build it.
That's a great way to put it.
The solution to this exegetical myopia, it isn't to just study less Greek.
Right.
And it isn't to abandon the original languages and rely entirely on English translations either. The solution is to fundamentally change the architectural framework through which we view language itself.
Okay, so a total paradigm shift.
Exactly. We have to shift from a purely formal approach to a functional one.
And that is exactly what we are doing today on this deep dive. We've both been there in the study, just banging our heads against the desk. And the crazy thing is, the problem isn't our vocabulary.
No, not at all.
The problem is the entire paradigm we use to analyze the text. So we are bringing in some heavy artillery today. We are looking at systemic functional linguistics, specifically the foundational work of Halliday and Mathiesen in Chapter 1 of their book, The Architecture of Language.
A fantastic resource.
It really is. And we're going to combine that theory with some of the most cutting-edge discourse analysis being done in the Greek New Testament right now. We are going to explore how abstract linguistic architecture radically changes how you read, study, and ultimately preach the biblical text.
To put it simply, we are moving from formal grammar to functional grammar.
Okay, break that down for us.
Sure. So formal grammar asks, what are the structural rules of this language? It's highly concerned with correctness, parsing, syntax, that sort of thing.
Rule book.
Right. Functional grammar, on the other hand, asks, how does this language function as a resource for making meaning in a specific social context?
Ah, okay.
And when you apply that functional lens to the New Testament, it completely blows the doors off traditional exegesis. You stop asking, what case is this noun? And you start asking, why did the author choose this specific grammatical resource to accomplish this specific relational goal?
Man, Halliday and Matheson's work on linguistic architecture completely rewrites the rules here. They start with a fundamental distinction that I think is incredibly clarifying for those of us in biblical studies.
Yes, the artifact versus specimen distinction.
Exactly. They distinguish between viewing a text as an artifact and viewing it as a specimen.
It is a vital distinction, and honestly, it's one where biblical scholars and pastors often stumble.
Why so?
Well, when we view a text as an artifact, we are focusing on it as an object valued entirely in its own right. We are asking questions like, why is this text historically or culturally significant? What is its theological legacy?
Right, which makes total sense for the Bible.
Of course.
Yeah.
For those of us in the church, the New Testament books are the ultimate sacred artifacts. They are the inspired word, historically foundational, deeply revered. But Halliday argues that if you only view a text as an artifact, you can't fully explain how it works linguistically.
You're missing half the picture.
Exactly.
Hmm.
You also have to view it as a specimen.
Let me see if I can picture this. Looking at a text as an artifact is like admiring a 12th century stained glass window in a huge cathedral.
I like that.
You step back, you look at the brilliant colors, you revere the story of the saints depicted in the glass, and you appreciate how it makes you feel when the sunlight hits it just right.
Yes.
But looking at it as a specimen is like a chemist coming in, setting up a lab right there in the cathedral, and analyzing the lead, the silica, the cobalt, and the copper to figure out exactly how the artisan manipulated those elements to make the glass interact with the light in that specific way.
That captures it beautifully. We revere the Gospel of John or the Epistle to the Romans as sacred artifacts. We marvel at the stained glass. But to truly understand them to be responsible and precise exegetes, we must treat them as specimens of first century Koine Greek.
Koine Greek, yeah. Or even, if we were in the Old Testament, treating words like kheh, said, as specimens of ancient Hebrew.
Precisely. We cannot explain why POW Los Paul's theology in Romans means what it does without understanding the specific Koine Greek meaning-making resources he selected from. The chemistry of the language matters. You can't separate the profound theological artifact from the mundane linguistic specimen.
And if we don't understand the chemistry, we risk misinterpreting the art itself, which leads us to the actual structure of the language. Halliday and Matheson talk about constituency and the rank scale.
Yes, the rank scale.
This is the compositional structure of language. It's how larger units of language are built out of smaller ones, right?
Yes, the lexicogrammatical rank scale. In Systemic Functional Linguistics, or SFL, you move from the highest rank of composition down to the lowest.
Okay, walk us through the ranks.
The highest rank is the clause, below that is the phrase or group, below that is the word, and the foundational rank at the very bottom is the morpheme.
Got it. Clause, phrase, word, morpheme.
Right. And each unit consists of one or more units of the rank immediately below it. So a clause is made up of phrases, a phrase is made up of words, and a word is made up of morphemes.
I used to think of this like Russian nesting dolls.
That's a common way to look at it.
Yeah, but honestly, that metaphor always felt a bit clunky to me because nesting dolls just sit cleanly inside one another. But language doesn't really work like that, especially Greek.
Yeah.
I think a better way to look at this rank scale is like baking.
Baking. Okay, I'm intrigued.
So a morpheme is like an individual ingredient: flour, sugar, eggs. A word is the cake batter once it's mixed. The phrase is the actual big cake, and the clause is the entire decorated dessert presentation sitting on the table.
Oh, that's excellent.
But here is the critical insight from Halliday that really clicked for me. Different languages have a completely different division of grammatical labor across these scales.
That is a massive point of divergence, and it is precisely why translating Greek into English is so notoriously difficult. English and Koine Greek divide their grammatical labor very, very differently.
Oh, so?
Well, English does a tremendous amount of its heavy lifting at the phrase or group rank. We use auxiliary verbs, prepositions, and strict word order to build meaning. Think about the English phrase, he will have been revealed.
Okay, he will have been revealed.
That's 5 separate words, standing next to each other, acting together at the phrase rank to convey tense, aspect, and voice.
But Koine Greek doesn't rely on the phrase rank like that at all, does it?
Not at all. Koine Greek is a highly inflected language. It collapses a massive amount of grammatical labor down into the word and morpheme ranks.
So, to use our baking analogy, in English, we keep all the ingredients in separate bowls on the counter. You can clearly see the future tense bowl, the passive voice bowl, the third-person pronoun bowl. But in Greek, the author throws all those ingredients into a single mixer and bakes them into one tight, incredibly dense word.
Precisely. Let's look at a specific Greek example to show just how dense this gets. Take the word aphenertai, ephane arphe.
Okay, ephane arphe.
Which is often translated into English as he, she, or it was revealed. Inside this single word, morphemic fusion is carrying an unbelievable communicative load. You have an augment the epsilon at the beginning, signaling past time.
Okay, that's one ingredient.
Then you have a stem phanero indicating the lexical meaning of making something manifest or revealing it. You have a theta etomorpheme fused in there, signaling both the passive voice and the aorist aspect simultaneously.
2 more ingredients fused together.
Yes. And finally, you have a zero ending morphologically signaling the third person singular.
That is wild. Inside the single baked word ephane rohthe, you have time, aspect, voice, mood, person, and number. It is doing the exact same amount of work that takes English 5 completely separate words to accomplish.
Yes, and SFL reminds us of a crucial structural reality here. Even though or its say is just one single word on the page, grammatically and functionally, it is acting as a total verbal group within a higher ranking clause.
It's huge.
It is. This is exactly why parsing is so ruthlessly drilled into you during your first year of seminary. You absolutely have to know how to identify those fused morphemes. But, and this is the pastoral trap we talked about earlier, it's also why parsing is just the beginning, not the end.
Right, you can't just stop there.
If you stop at the word rank, if you just catalog those morphemes and close your books, you miss how that entire verbal group is functioning in the broader clause complex. You are staring at the chemistry of the lead and forgetting to step back and look at the stained glass window.
We spend all our time admiring the flour and the eggs, and we never actually taste the cake.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got the rank scale down. We know how the units stack up. But language isn't just structural, right? Halliday says it's also multistratal. It operates on multiple levels of reality simultaneously.
Yes.
He maps language across 4 strata: context, semantics, lexigrammar, and phonology or graphology.
This stratification is the engine that allows human language to expand its meaning potential indefinitely. You start at the highest stratum, which is the eco-social environment, the context.
The real world.
Yes, the real world. That context interfaces with the semantics, which is the realm of meaning. Semantics is where human experience and interpersonal relationships are transformed into abstract meaning. Then that meaning is realized or transformed into wording at the lexicogrammatical stratum.
So thoughts becoming words.
Basically. And finally, that wording is expressed physically through either phonology, which is sounding, or graphology, which is writing.
It's like a chain of realization. The context demands a meaning, the meaning selects a wording, and the wording demands a physical expression.
That's a great summary.
And related to this chain is a concept that I think is one of the most brilliant paradigms in the whole book, the concept of instantiation. Halliday uses the analogy of climate and weather to explain instantiation, and man, it immediately clears up so much confusion about how we define a language.
It's a brilliant analogy because it perfectly clarifies the relationship between the abstract system of a language and a concrete actual text.
Right.
The system is the entire meaning potential of a language. Think of the system as the climate. The climate isn't something you can physically touch. You can't put the climate in a jar. It is the long-term underlying potential of an environment over decades or centuries.
Okay, so the climate is everything that could happen.
Yes. The text, on the other hand, is a specific instance of language. The text is the weather. It is what is happening right now actively outside your window.
So when people say climate and weather, they aren't actually talking about 2 completely different physical things. They're the exact same phenomena, just viewed from different standpoints on a client of time.
Exactly.
Applying this to our exegesis, if the entire grammatical potential of first century Koine Greek, every possible vocabulary word, every possible syntactic structure available to a speaker in the Mediterranean, if all of that is the climate, then the Gospel of Mark is, what, a localized thunderstorm?
A perfect way to phrase it. The Gospel of Mark is a specific instantiation of the Koine Greek climate. Mark didn't use every word in the Greek language. He selected specific elements from the climate to create his specific weather event.
Makes total sense.
But what Halliday points out, which is absolutely vital for biblical studies, is that between the massive overall climate and the specific thunderstorm, there is an intermediate level. It's a sub-potential called register.
Register. We talk about this informally all the time in everyday life, like, oh, he's speaking in a formal register, or this is a really casual register. But in SFL, it has a very specific technical meaning, doesn't it?
Yes. Register is a functional variety of language determined by the context of a situation. It shifts the probabilities of the system.
Can you give an example of that in the text?
Sure. In the New Testament, we have drastically different registers. The historical narrative register of Luke's Gospel acts very differently than the epistolary register of Paulos writing to Corinth. And that acts entirely differently than the apocalyptic register of John's Revelation. They all share the exact same Koine Greek climate, but they're systemic probabilities. The statistical likelihood of an author making certain grammatical choices shift drastically based on their register.
That makes total sense when you think about preaching. Like, if you are studying a narrative text in Acts, you naturally expect a high frequency of indicative past tense verbs, right?
Mm.
Because the historical register is primarily concerned with chronicling events that already happened.
Right.
But if you shift over to an epistolary text, say a letter to a church in crisis like Galatians, you expect a sudden high density of imperatives and subjunctives. Because the epistolary register in that context isn't just chronicling history, it's actively trying to enable and regulate the behavior of the readers.
Yes, the goal is completely different.
If you judge the weather of Paul's letters by the climate of Luke's gospel, you're going to get incredibly frustrated. You're bringing an umbrella to a drought.
And that realization leads us directly into the heart of SFL, the metafunctional spectrum. Halliday argues that language is arranged along three simultaneous functional lines.
Okay, the three metafunctions.
Yes. This is crucial. Whenever we use language, we are never just doing one thing. We are always doing three things at once.
Always three.
Always three. First, there is the ideational metafunction. This is language functioning as reflection. It is how we construe human and divine experience. It's how we name things, how we categorize the world, and how we establish logical relationships like time, cause, and condition.
Okay, so let's tie that to the Greek text. When a biblical author utilizes transitivity, when they choose between an active, middle, or passive voice, that is the ideational metafunction at work.
Yes, exactly.
It's construing experience. It's telling us who's doing what to whom. Like when a Greek author specifically chooses the middle voice to show that the subject is uniquely, personally participating in the results of the action. They aren't just doing the action is bouncing back and affecting them. That's a specific experiential meaning being encoded.
Precisely. You are mapping the reality of the event. But simultaneously, at the exact same time, the author is employing the interpersonal metafunction.
The second one.
Yes, this is language as action. While we are reflecting experience ideationally, we are simultaneously enacting social relationships. We are informing, questioning, commanding, or expressing our attitude toward the listener. Every single message is addressing someone, and it establishes a power dynamic.
Oh, this is a huge unlock for the epistles. When P.O.W. Los writes to the Galatians, he isn't just dropping a detached theology textbook on their doorstep.
No, he certainly isn't.
He is enacting a relationship. He is establishing strict apostolic authority, or in other places, expressing deep, vulnerable, pastoral anguish. And he does that through the interpersonal metafunction, specifically through his choices in the mood system. When he uses a sharp imperative command rather than a gentle subjunctive, he is flexing an interpersonal muscle.
Yes. He is demanding a response from the reader. And finally, holding those two together is the textual metafunction.
The third piece of the puzzle.
This is language as an enabler. It's the flow. It organizes the discourse, creating cohesion, thematic progression, and continuity so that the ideational and interpersonal meanings can actually be communicated effectively in a linear sequence.
So if the ideational metafunction is the cargo, and the interpersonal metafunction is the destination, the textual metafunction is the vehicle that actually drives it down the road.
Exactly. Without the textual metafunction, you just have a random pile of experiential facts and emotional attitudes. It wouldn't make any sense.
Okay, let's take these theoretical concepts, the rank scale, stratification, the climate of instantiation, and these three metafunctions, and let's walk across the bridge directly into the Koine Greek New Testament, because this is where the theory actually changes what a pastor does on a Tuesday morning.
Let's do it.
We talked about the division of labor and how Greek collapses its grammar down into the morpheme rank with all those fused endings. This has massive implications for how Greek authors structure their sentences compared to English, doesn't it?
It changes the entire game. Think about English again.
Yeah.
Because English relies on the phrase rank and word order to tell you who is doing the action and who is receiving it. Our word order is incredibly rigid.
Right. Subject, then verb, then object.
Yes. The dog bit the man. If you change the word order to the man bit the dog, you haven't just altered the emphasis, you have completely changed the experiential meaning of the sentence. The victim is now the aggressor.
But in Greek, you can put those words in almost any order. You can say, bit the man the dog, or the man the dog bit. And the meaning of who bit whom stays exactly the same.
Why is that?
Because the morphemic case endings, the nominative ending on dog and the accusative ending on man, they tell you who the subject and object are, regardless of where they physically sit in the sentence. The morphemes do the work that English relies on word order to do.
Exactly. But here is the critical insight from SFL that completely changed discourse analysis. Just because Greek word order is flexible does not mean it is random.
Right. They aren't just throwing words at the page.
If word order isn't required to signal the subject and the object, what is it doing? Why would an author choose one order over another? According to SFL, Greek word order is the primary tool of the textual metafunction.
This is where the lights really come on for me.
Authors alter word order deliberately to manage the flow of discourse. They use the beginning of the clause for the theme.
The theme.
The theme is the local orientation, the starting point of the message. It tells the reader, here's the conceptual peg I want you to hang this next thought on. And conversely, they often place the most important new information toward the end of the clause.
So it's a structural choice.
Yes. So when a Greek author takes a direct object, which usually sits comfortably after the verb and forcibly fronts it to the very beginning of a sentence, before the verb and the subject, they are making a massive textual choice. They are screaming to the reader, this is the theme. Everything I'm about to say is oriented around this object.
Let's apply that.
Yeah.
When we sit down to write a sermon, and we just read the standard English translation, which has been forced back into a rigid subject-verb-object order just to make sense in English, well, we completely lose the textual metafunction.
You lose it entirely.
We lose the author's emphasis. If we aren't looking at the Greek to see what was fronted as the theme, we are preaching a flat text.
You are preaching the ideational experiential, meaning you are correctly identifying who did what, but you are completely ignoring the textual prominence. You're giving the congregation the raw data without the author's intended priority.
Wow.
You might build an entire sermon around the subject of the sentence when the original author specifically fronted the object to be the theological focal point.
That is incredibly convicting. But I want to push back on something here, or rather, I want to bring up a major practical obstacle that Halliday mentions and that every pastor deals with.
Okay, what's that?
Halliday talks about graphological mismatches. He points out that punctuation and writing systems often do not align with the actual grammatical units of a spoken language.
Yes, that's true.
We treat the Bible's chapters and verses as if they were handed down on Mount Sinai. Does this SFL framework imply that Stephen Langton's 13th century chapter divisions and Robert Estienne's 16th century verse divisions are actively ruining our exegesis?
In short, yes, really ruining it.
They are a massive, historically conditioned graphological mismatch. You have to remember what the original text looked like. The original uncial manuscripts of the New Testament were written in scriptio continua.
Continuous script.
Yes. There were no spaces between words, there was no punctuation, there were no lowercase letters, just a continuous block of capitalized text. The modern verses and chapters are graphological conventions added centuries later to help people find things quickly.
A search index, basically.
Exactly. But they frequently obscure and sometimes outright destroy the natural lexicogrammatical boundaries of the Greek text.
Give me a concrete example. Show me where a verse number ruins a sermon. Think about Ephesians chapter 1, verses 3 through 14. In your modern English Bible, that's broken up into 12 distinct verses. It's translated as several separate sentences, and there are probably a couple of paragraph breaks inserted by the translation committee.
Right, it looks like a normal page of a book.
But in the original Greek, Ephesians 1.3 through 14 is one massive single grammatical clause complex. It is a single, uninterrupted flow of structural dependencies.
Wait, you mean P.O.W. wrote that entire section as one sentence?
Grammatically speaking, yes.
So P.O.W. writes this soaring, majestic, interconnected symphony of praise where every single thought is grammatically dependent on the one before it, and we come along and chop it up into 12 discrete little independent nuggets so we can print verse 4 on a coffee mug.
That's exactly what we do. Let's look at that. Verse 3 is the main independent clause. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has blessed us.
Okay, that's the anchor.
Yes. Then verse 4 begins with a dependent participle phrase, even as he chose us in him. If you preach verse 4 in isolation, you are treating a dependent clause as if it were an independent reality.
Because it has a big number 4 next to it.
Right, but you cannot understand the choosing in verse 4 without attaching it to the blessing in verse 3. SFL discourse analysis forces us to ignore the modern verse numbers and locate the true clause complexes. You have to trace the actual grammatical dependencies to understand the discourse. The verse numbers are an artificial grid laid over a living organism.
Man, we've been letting a 16th century printer dictate our exegesis instead of the first century author's grammar.
We really have.
Okay, so what does this all mean for the person sitting in their study right now trying to write a message for Sunday? How does this abstract linguistic architecture actually pay off in the pulpit? We have 3 specific scholars mentioned in our outline who are using this SFL framework to revolutionize discourse analysis. Let's start with Jeffrey T. Reed and his work on epistolary mapping.
Reed is a fantastic example of taking Halliday's abstract theories and applying them directly to the trenches of the New Testament. Reed uses SFL to perform what he calls suprisentential analysis.
Meaning above the sentence.
Yes. He argues that we have to move past sentence-level philology. We can't just parse verbs in a vacuum. We have to look at the paragraph rank and the discourse rank. He is looking for the domain of prominence.
Domain of prominence.
He asks, is this specific word prominent just in its local immediate clause, or is it the central driving theme of the entire letter?
But Reed runs into a massive problem with Halliday's theory right out of the gate, doesn't he? I noticed this when I was reading the source material. Halliday's concept of tracking given versus new information relies heavily on phonology.
It does.
In English, we signal what is new information through tonic emphasis, vocal pitch. We raise our voice or stress a syllable to show what we want the listener to focus on. If I say, I didn't buy the red car, I bought the BLE car, the pitch of my voice tells you the color is the new prominent information.
Exactly. The sound carries the meaning.
But Halliday was studying spoken language in the modern era. We can't hear POWs speaking. Paul is dead. We have no tape recorders from the 1st century. Doesn't that completely break Halliday's model for biblical studies?
It's a brilliant observation, and it's the exact hurdle Reed had to overcome. You are entirely correct. We cannot recover the spoken melody, the tonic emphasis of ancient Koine Greek.
Right.
Therefore, Halliday's phonological given new structure is fundamentally inaccessible to us. Reed recognizes this limitation and adapts the SFL model. He rejects the phonological reliance. Instead, he relies on theme rime, which, as we discussed, is based on word order position, not sound.
Oh, okay.
And he brings in Ellen Prince's concept of information status to track how entities move through a discourse.
So instead of listening for a vocal stress that we can't possibly hear, Reed visually tracks how an entity, say a person like Timothy or a concept like the gospel, how it first enters the text as brand new information.
Yeah.
And then he watches how it becomes given or assumed information as it moves through the subsequent paragraphs. And he does this by mapping what SFL calls cohesive ties.
Yes. Cohesive ties are the linguistic threads that sew a text together and keep it from unraveling. Reed maps several types of ties, but 2 are particularly useful for exegesis: identity chains and similarity chains.
Walk us through those.
An identity chain tracks references to the exact same entity. For example, if you look at Philippians chapter 1, you can trace a chain of references to Paul himself. He starts with his name, Pio Loseles. In the next clause, it becomes the pronoun I. Later, it's the object, me, and then the possessive, my bonds. That is an identity chain weaving through the text.
But he doesn't just track exact identities, right? He also maps similarity chains.
Correct. A similarity chain is where an author uses different words from the exact same semantic field to build a theme. You might track the concept of sorrow. The author uses the word weeping, then 2 verses later uses sorrow, then a paragraph later uses grieved. They aren't the same word, but they form a cohesive semantic chain.
See, I love this because this is where the sermon outline literally just preaches itself.
Oh, absolutely.
If you are struggling with a dense passage in Philippians, you sit down and you map the identity chain of Paul, the I, me, my bonds. Then you map a similarity chain of suffering and affliction. And then you map an identity chain of the gospel or the word. You color code them on your page.
Yes, visually tracking them.
And when you step back, you can visually see where those chains intersect, where Paul's suffering and the gospel all collide in the exact same clause complex. You know absolutely, without a doubt, exactly what the author is on about.
You found the focal point.
You aren't guessing at the main point based on a single cool Greek word. The linguistic architecture itself is showing you the climax of the paragraph.
Precisely. You are finding the domain of prominence objectively, rooted in the author's own grammar, rather than subjectively imposing your own theological interest onto the text. You are letting the text's own cohesive ties dictate the structure and the emphasis of your sermon. It protects you from yourself.
It's a guardrail. Okay, let's move from Paul's letters to one of the most notoriously difficult books in the New Testament to outline. The book of Hebrews.
Oh, Hebrews, yes.
Cynthia Long Westfall has done some groundbreaking work here using SFL. Traditional commentaries usually treat Hebrews as this massive, dense theological treatise on the Levitical priesthood and Melchizedek, with these annoying, abrupt little pastoral warnings sprinkled in as digressions.
That is the classic formal content analysis approach. You outline the heavy theological points about angels, Moses, and the heavenly tabernacle. Those form your main Roman numerals in the outline, and you treat the commands, let us not drift away, let us draw near, let us hold fast, as parenthetical interruptions to the main theological argument. But Westphal uses SFL to completely flip that script. She insists we must treat Hebrews as a functional communicative event, not just a repository of theology.
So we've been looking at Hebrews as an artifact, and she looks at it as a specimen of communication.
Yeah, exactly.
And she focuses heavily on the interpersonal metafunction, right?
She does. She looks at the grammatical resources of mood and voice. Traditional scholars focus on the indicative mood, the statements of theological fact. The indicatives carry the ideational metafunction. They describe reality.
But what is?
Yes. But Westphal proves, statistically and syntactically, that the interpersonal metafunctions, specifically the hortatory subjunctives, those repeated commands of let us, is actually the mainline message of Hebrews.
This was a massive aha moment for me. So the theological apologetic, the whole deep dive into Melchizedek, isn't actually the main point of the book.
No, it's not.
To use Westphal's phrase, which I think is just devastatingly accurate, a purely theological apologetic is an inept response to a group in crisis.
It is a devastatingly accurate phrase.
Think about it pastorally.
Yeah.
If a house church in the first century is facing severe persecution, they're losing their jobs, they're being marginalized, and they want to give up and abandon the faith, giving them a dry 40-minute lecture on the nuances of the Levitical priesthood is terrible pastoral care.
It doesn't function to save them.
Exactly. The theology is just the fuel. The pastoral command to hold on and draw near is the engine.
That is the true power of analyzing the text systemically. By analyzing the mood of the verbs, Westphal shows that the author's primary rhetorical engine is the command. The dense theology is the background motivation supporting the command. The commands aren't digressions, they are the entire destination of the discourse.
Wow.
If you preach Hebrews chapter 7 through 10 just as a systematic theology of the atonement, and you miss the interpersonal demand placed on the congregation in chapter 10 to draw near with a true heart, you have failed to preach the text functionally.
You've treated it as a beautiful stained glass window, but you never let the light shine through it onto the congregation. You've preached a lecture, not a sermon.
Well said.
That is a massive paradigm shift. It completely inverts how you evaluate the weight of a passage. Okay, our final scholar is Constantine Campbell and his work on narrative verbal aspect. Now, for anyone who has been to seminary in the last 20 years, you know that verbal aspect is a blood-soaked battleground in Greek studies.
Oh, it is a fierce debate.
But Campbell brings Halliday's SFL into the fray with amazing clarifying results.
Yes. Campbell treats the Greek verb as a functional equipollent system of choices.
Hold on, let's pause right there. Equipollent. That is a heavy linguistic word. Break that down for us. What does it mean for a system to be equipollent?
It means that within a system, every choice has a specific, equally forceful, and mutually exclusive semantic value. It's not a system of a default choice versus an exception. It is a deliberate binary or ternary choice, like a toggle switch on a soundboard.
No toggle switch, okay.
When an author chooses a specific tense form, they are subjectively pulling a lever to construct the architecture of the narrative. Campbell synthesizes this SFL view of the verb with Paul Hopper's linguistic theory of grounding.
Grounding. This is the idea of dividing a story into mainline versus background information. Right?
Yes. When you read a narrative, not all information is equal in weight. Some actions drive the plot forward. They are the sequential events. Other statements provide the setting, the context, or the description.
Okay, so how does Greek handle that?
Campbell argues that in Koine Greek, the aorist tense form, because it has perfective aspect, carries the mainline or foreground of the narrative. It provides the skeletal structure of the plot.
The aorist is the main line.
Yes. Conversely, the imperfect and pluperfect tense forms, because they possess imperfective aspect, carry the background or offline descriptive material.
Let's make sure we clearly define those aspects before we apply them. Perfective aspect is like looking at a parade from a helicopter. You see the beginning, the middle, and the end of the event as a single, complete whole.
Yes, a perfect analogy.
An imperfective aspect is like standing on the street corner watching the parade pass by. You are immersed in the unfolding action. You don't see the beginning or the end, just the ongoing process.
Exactly. The aorist looks at the whole event. The imperfect looks at the unfolding process.
So let's put this in an analogy for preaching through a massive narrative like the Gospel of Luke. The aorist verbs are the main highway driving the plot forward. Jesus went, Jesus healed, Jesus said. If you just isolate and read only the aorist verbs, you get the basic driving plot of the chapter.
Right.
The imperfect verbs, on the other hand, are the scenic overlooks. They pull you off the highway to give you the background context. The crowds were pressing in, the Pharisees were grumbling.
That is exactly right. The author uses the aorist to move you down the road and the imperfect to paint the scenery around you. But Campbell goes deeper. He relies heavily on Halliday's concept of stratification, specifically the difference between the semantic stratum and the pragmatic stratum.
Semantics and pragmatics. Okay.
In SFL, semantics is the uncancelable encoded meaning of a word. Pragmatics is the realization of that meaning in a specific real-world context, which can be heavily influenced by surrounding words.
Okay, unpack that distinction for the Greek verb. How does semantics differ from pragmatics when I'm, parsing in my study?
Campbell argues that a verb's aspect, perfective or imperfective, is its semantics. It is constant, it is uncancelable. An aorist is always perfective. But a verb's time reference, whether the action happened in the past, present, or future, is often pragmatics.
Wait, really? The time isn't hard-coded?
It is not hard-coded into the verb itself. It is an implicature generated by the surrounding discourse context. This is why you can have what grammarians call the historical present in Greek, where an author uses a present tense verb to describe an event that clearly happened in the past.
Oh, this happens all the time in Mark's Gospel, and it drives first-year Greek students absolutely crazy. Jesus walks up to the sea, and he said, wait, why did he just switch from past to present?
It feels like an error in English.
Yeah. So Campbell is saying that the present tense form isn't primarily about present time, it's a discourse tense form. Campbell notes that the present and the perfect tense forms are heavily attracted to direct speech. They encode spatial and relational proximity. They bring the action close to the reader, enacting the interpersonal metafunction.
Precisely. When Mark suddenly switches from aorist past tense verbs on the main line to a present tense verb right in the middle of a story, he isn't making a grammar mistake. He hasn't forgotten how to write. He is deliberately pulling a lever on the equipollent soundboard.
He's doing it on purpose.
Yes. He is using the present tense as a discourse marker to say to the reader, pay attention. This is immediate. This is happening right in front of you. He is actively managing the spatial proximity of the narrative to draw the reader in.
So if you are preaching through Mark, and you are tracking those aorist highway verbs, and you notice a sudden shift to the present tense, you shouldn't just smooth it out in your English translation so it sounds pretty.
No, absolutely not.
You need to preach the immediacy of that moment. The author's grammatical choice is a massive neon sign pointing to the climax of the scene. You have to make the congregation feel the proximity that the Greek text is demanding.
And that realization really brings us full circle to where we started today. This entire SFL framework moves us decisively away from looking at the Greek text as a dead specimen on an autopsy table. We aren't just parsing verbs to find a secret, isolated theological code.
Right.
We are reading the text as a living, breathing artifact of meaning. Every single morpheme, every clause complex, every shift in word order to front a theme, and every change in mood or aspect was a deliberate, meaningful choice by the original author.
They chose those specific tools from the vast KOI-NA climate to reflect their experience, to enact a very specific relationship with their reader, and to weave a cohesive, compelling message.
Exactly.
When you finally realize that, the text just explodes with life. You aren't staring at a math equation on a Friday afternoon anymore. You are looking at the sheet music of a symphony, and you finally know how to play it.
And if we truly embrace SFL's concept of instantiation and context, it leaves us with a lingering and perhaps deeply provocative thought for our own ministries.
Oh, lay it on us.
If a text is truly language functioning in context and meaning is realized by the social environment, how does your specific modern pastoral context, your church's culture, your relational tenor with your congregation, the power dynamics in your specific room retroactively shape how the first century text is instantiated when you preach it this Sunday?
Wow. That is heavy. Because the text isn't just what is on the page, it's what happens in the room.
Exactly. Are you actually enacting the same interpersonal meaning the biblical author intended? If the book of Hebrews is a desperate pastoral plea to a suffering church to hold fast, and you deliver it as a harsh academic rebuke from a position of unassailable authority, have you actually preached the text? Or is your modern delivery, your specific instantiation of the weather, changing the theology entirely?
Man. That is the question we all need to wrestle with in this study this week. We have to ensure that our preaching doesn't just accurately translate the ideational facts, but that it faithfully enacts the interpersonal heart of the text.
It's a high calling.
It is. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Open your Greek testaments this week. Look past the parsing. Ignore the verse numbers. Look for the clause complexes, the mood shifts, the aorist highways, and the living architecture of the text. Because when you see how it's built, you'll finally understand what it means.